Today's Medical Grand Rounds is part of the 2019 Goldman-Berland Lectureship in Palliative Medicine, which is named for two Providence St. Vincent Medical Center physicians who distinguished themselves in excellent whole-person care we now know as palliative care. This lectureship has been sustained through the years by the generous contributions of friends of the Goldman-Berland families and of the Ethics Center. This morning we are joined by Dr. Berland. Thank you. Welcome. It is now my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Dr. Daniel Tsai, whose scholarship I saw on the international stage in professional clinical ethics conferences. In fact, in 2017, he gave a talk in Singapore on this morning's subject that planted the seed in my mind of why he would make a great Goldman-Berland speaker. Dr. Tsai is a professor at the Department of and Graduate Institute of Medical Education and Bioethics at the National Taiwan University College of Medicine and director at the Center for Biomedical Ethics at National Taiwan University. He is also an attending physician in the Department of Medical Research at the National Taiwan University Hospital. Dr. Tsai has published extensively in both Chinese language and English publications. He received his medical degree from National Taiwan University College of Medicine and earned his Ph.D. in bioethics from the University of Manchester in the United Kingdom. He was awarded an honorary membership by the UNESCO Chair of Bioethics in 2015 and served as the Vice President of the International Association of Bioethics from 2016 to 2017. Dr. Tsai is currently President of the Taiwan Association of Institutional Review Boards and a member of the Merck Bioethics Advisory Panel. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Tsai.
Thank you, Nick, for your kind introduction. And good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to firstly extend my thanks to the center for inviting me and giving me this great honor to give this talk. The topic I'd like to tackle today, given by Nick, is the end-of-life decision and Eastern religious perspectives. So I will be trying to cover Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism. So ethical challenges often arise when healthcare professionals are in phase of the life and death decision of their patients. Setting treatment goals, choosing curative or palliative therapy, trading off between pain control and preserving consciousness, deciding withholding or withdrawing life-sustaining treatment are both complex clinical decisions and controversial ethical judgments. So these challenges increase when cultural tradition, religious belief, social practice, individual and family members are involved. So I would like, firstly, to give you a very, very short introduction to Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism. And then we will move on to quite common end-of-life choices, including pain, suffering, death, PVS, and other topics. So I'll try to come to some summary at the end. So I believe in this hospital, cultural ethical dilemma in healthcare should be quite common. Okay. Taking the example from Taiwan in some Asia countries, imparting bad news is not always easy. Sometimes the children don't want their parents to know that they are already in end of life. And discussing DNR, Advanced Directive ACP, will be even more difficult because there will be violating some taboo not to talk about death. And CPR, okay, sometimes you will meet a family asking an extended CPR because the child is coming to the hospital to meet the parents the last time. So sometimes it takes 2 hours, 3 hours. They still hope you continue. They are on their way. So blood transfusion, an old question. Normally we know that Jehovah's Witness, they have some reservation in blood transfusion. But interestingly, in Taiwan, in some Asian country, a religion called Iguan Dao also forbid this kind of transfusion because they believe if you receive blood from someone who take meat, okay, non-vegetarian, that will kind of pollute your blood. So there were some cases in my hospital. We do encounter such kind of challenge, okay? And organ donation and terminating life support and other invasive treatment quite often refused by family due to religious reasons. So this is one example I took from the local survey in Taiwan. In 2016, social change survey shows that Buddhism in Taiwan is about 20%, and Taoism 14%, and folk religion, which is a combination of Buddhist and Taoist and ancestor worships, actually played nearly 1/3. And comparatively, Christian tradition, Christian faith is less than 6% in total. And then we see that there are about 1/4 of the population responded that they have no particular religious faith. And then we come to in the clinical setting, talking about medical ethics or bioethics. I believe we are familiar with the following principles. From Belmont report in 1979, principle for research ethics is respect for person, beneficence, and justice. And the same years, an important work, Principle of Biomedical Ethics, published, which referred to respect for autonomy, beneficence, non-maleficence, and justice are the principle of biomedical ethics. So this is quite widely used, and even in other places in the world. So now we come to some religious or cultural tradition. Firstly, the Confucius. In 1962, philosopher Jasper, he defined that there are 4 paradigmatic individuals, including Confucius, Socrates, Buddha, and Jesus Christ. So today we will have a chance to cover 2 of them. And then Confucius has been the dominant ideology in Chinese philosophy that has directed social, political, educational, and moral thought in Chinese society. So in my earlier research, I also found that the ancient Chinese medical ethics was also established on the foundation of Confucius ethics. So when doctors practice medicine in ancient Chinese, what they follow is actually the Confucius teaching about Ren, Yi, and Li. So these are my earlier publications, and some of them I will use them as a framework for introducing Confucianism. So I summarize the moral philosophy of Confucius into the 5 points as follows. Firstly, it is the merging of self-cultivation and social political reform. So Confucius believed that political order must be established on social order, and social order must come from individual cultivation. So he said, from the Son of Heaven down to the mass of the people, the cultivation of the self is the foundation of everything beside. So when the heart being rectified, and the person will be cultivated, and the family will be regulated, and the state and the kingdom will be made tranquil and happy. So for a virtuous person in our education, for our kids, for our next generation, is not a small thing. It is the guarantee of, not really a guarantee, at least a promise leading to the prosperity of the whole kingdom. And secondly, the pursuit of Tao. Tao generally means role, path, method, doctrine, or moral teaching. So it is interpreted in different meanings, but in general, it signifies the universal moral order, the ideal status of moral achievement for men to define, pursue, and accomplish. So Schwartz said that it's an all-encompassing state of affair, embracing outer social political order and the inner moral life. So we can see these concepts quite commonly seen in different religions. And then the ethical system of Ren, humaneness, Yi, righteousness, and Li, the rule of propriety. So Confucius' teaching of these 3 important virtues or principles are most fundamental. Ren, the meaning means love, benevolence, humanity, and virtues, and or humaneness. It signifies the ideal relationship between person. So you see the Chinese character here. The left side is actually human, and these 2 slash is 2, meaning 2 person. So it's the ideal relationship between persons. And Yi means righteousness, appropriateness, obligation, and justice. So it's actually refer in the modern sense much to justice, or the theory of justice. And Li indicates ceremony, rites, decorum, courtesy, etiquette. At first, it referred to the ceremonial order, and then in its full sense, connotes social political order. So these are 3 things. In the Yi and Ren could be said to be the inner core of morality that motivates and guides men to pursue Tao. And the Li, rule of propriety, could be described as the outer form and the standard of morality. And fourth is the moral idea of a gentleman, a Junzi. Okay, Junzi also translated into a gentleman. Okay, so it is the man of high moral achievement who constantly tries to improve and cultivate himself to achieve various stages of perfection. Okay, so in my own study and my own interpretation, I found that moral character of the Junzi demonstrate two qualities. One is the autonomous person, which includes self-activation, self-determination, self-reliance, self-cultivation. And the second, a relational person who is committed to others regarding morality and altruism. So this ultimate concern and self-realization of Confucian ideal person consists in giving security and peace to people through moral self-cultivation. Okay? And next is the Wulun, 5 basic human relationships. Confucius stressed family value and filial piety. Probably you are more familiar with these. Chinese people, they emphasize a lot of filial piety. And through articulating the 5 basic human relationships, which govern relationship between ruler and minister, father and son, husband and wife, elder and younger brother, and the relationship between friends. So these are the 5 basic human relationships. And Wulun gave form to Chinese society and social institution, from government down to interpersonal transaction. So relation, emphasize or orientation is important characteristics in Chinese culture. So I always wonder, did they really look like that? Okay, 3,000 years ago. Okay, how can we really recognize these are their true figure? But you can see that the 2 main figures, Confucius and his follower Mencius, are the most important 2 classic Confucian scholars. So I come to connect this theory to bioethics. Okay, so in my paper I try to articulate the bioethics principle and Confucius moral philosophy. So in conclusion, I found that moral values, which the 4 prima facie principles of respect for autonomy, beneficence, non-maleficence, and justice uphold, are expressly identifiable in Confucius' teaching. So his theory, the important theory, actually tell you lots of teaching that these 4 principles are existent. Okay, and however, Confucius emphasized on filial piety, family value, love of gradation, altruism of person, and role-specified relation-oriented ethics will inevitably influence the specification and application of these principles. So you can see that in the traditional way of doing it, you see beneficence got a favorable position, okay, and the respect for individual autonomy may be diminished, okay. And in contrast, we see that in the modern bioethics development in Western country, respecting for autonomy of the individual is more and more important, okay. And one scholar even say the 4 principles, they are equal, but respect for autonomy is the first among equal, okay. And this is more stressed from a liberal Western point of view. But nevertheless, in Confucius philosophy, there are other resources could be adopted to do a good balance, such as the doctrine of mean and balancing the 2-dimensional personhood. It will prevent you lay too much emphasis either on autonomy or simply on beneficence. Okay, and then I'll talk to you briefly about the Taoism. Okay, and this is becoming more and more abstract. Okay, Tao emphasizing living in harmony with the Tao. Okay, Taoism different from Confucianism by not emphasizing rigid ritual and social order. Okay, Taoism emphasized wu wei, action without intention. Okay, and naturalness, simplicity, spontaneity, and the 3 treasures, meaning compassion, frugality, and humility. Okay, these are the key concepts. And firstly, the philosophy of Lao Tzu, Wu Wei. Okay, so be what it is and do nothing for the sake of doing it. Okay, man take his law from the earth take its laws from heaven, heaven takes the law from Tao. Okay, Tao exists again, and the law of Tao is being with what it is. Okay. And secondly, the Tao in its regular course does nothing for the sake of doing it. And so there's nothing which it does not do. So it's quite difficult to understand, okay? It's 8 hours in the morning, so you are still getting it, okay? And the next, okay, what about the Taoist perspective of life and death, okay? All things are one, okay? All things belongs to one treasury, and death and life should be viewed in the same way. What does this mean, okay? All things under heaven sprang from its as existing, and that existence sprang from it as non-existent. So the Tao produced one, one produced two, two produced three, three produced all things. So quite abstract, difficult to understand. But I believe if you work for continuously 36 hours, 40 hours, you will understand this, okay? So it's the same, okay. In difference to the distinction between life and death, okay? So it's quite a commonly used words. It's like the fallen leaves return to roots, okay? Lao Tzu said that, okay, everything eventually will return to its roots, okay? And it's called the state of stillness. And the stillness may be called a reporting that they have fulfilled their appointed end. The report of the fulfillment is the regular, unchanged rule. To know that unchanging rule is to be intelligent. So when you come to this point, Lao Tzu tell his student that, okay, you will get smart, okay, once you get it. And thirdly, return to nature after death. So this is by Zhuangzi, okay? Zhuangzi is another key figure, just like Mengzi to Kongzi. So this is Zhuangzi to Lao Tzu, okay? He said that, okay, when he was about to die, his disciple signified they are going to have a grand ceremonial burial. But he told them, okay, I shall have heaven and earth for my coffin and its shell, the sun and moon for my two round symbols of jade, the star and the constellations for my pearls and jewels, and all things assisted as the morals. So we don't really need a big ceremony. So the heaven, the nature, is actually my burial. Okay, so this is quite elegant and a lovely point. So these are about Taoism. Okay, then I will come to Buddhism. Okay, and more complex and abstract. Okay, so I am not entirely qualified to talk on this topic because my academic research is not really in Buddhism, but due to some need, and also you see from the previous statistics, okay, there are around 20% of the general population, they believe in Buddhism. So when we face our, like the friends, family, and patients, quite often the idea they share from Buddhism is seeable. Okay, so these are my main academic resources. Okay, so Buddhism was found in northeast India by Gautama, and it was about 2,500 years ago. So then he was honored, called Buddha, okay, the enlightened one. Okay, and the diversity found in this tradition make it impossible to speak of Buddhism in the singular or to assert an official Buddhist perspectives. So if anyone would like to tell you that this is the Buddhist perspective of death and dying, of assisted production, or embryo research, you should hold some reservation because there could be so different versions from different traditions. Okay, so quickly we see there are two primary trajectories: Theravada and Mahayana. Okay, so the Theravada is the way of the elder, the old tradition, and it is more in Thailand, Burma, Indo, and China. Again, and for the Mahayana, meaning the large vehicle, this is more circulated in the north or west Asia, like China, Korea, Japan, and Himalayas. So this is quite often if you travel in Thailand, in Asian countries, you will see this Buddha. So I try to make a map, okay, what is this basic theories, so you come up to these diagrams. So Buddhism, firstly, the goal is for enlightenment. Okay, this is a state of spiritual and moral perfection which can be attained by any human being who lives in accordance with the Buddhist teaching. Okay, and Buddhism does not believe in the supreme being or create God. Okay, so you can say this is not really a God-believing religion. Okay, and firstly, Dhamma. Okay, Dhamma means universal or natural law. And every aspect of life is regulated by Dharma. Living in accordance with Dharma and implementing its requirement leads to happiness, fulfillment, and salvation. And karma, the doctrine of that moral action inevitably have repercussion on the one who performed them. Okay, and this is linked to belief in rebirth. Okay, so it determines the good and bad fortune which a person experiences in life. Okay, so this is meaning like what you do will be important. And ahimsa, okay, this is very important in bioethics, meaning non-harming, non-injuring, or respect for life. So loving kindness is not limited to human being, but it's extended to all sentient beings. So quite often when you meet people who believe in Buddhism, they are mostly vegetarian, okay, they don't eat meat. And there are 5 precepts noting that do not kill, do not steal, do not commit adultery, and others. So do not kill will be more important in bioethics. And then the middle path, okay, very much similar to what in Confucianism said, the Zhongyong, the middle way. And then the suffering, okay, suffering is an important concept in Buddhism. So the Buddhist morality concerns suffering in the sense that what is bad leads to suffering, and what is good leads to the elimination of suffering. So sometimes we need to be careful about this idea, okay, because when our patient, they are suffering from difficult end of that cancer, they might question, why? Did I do something wrong? They will question, okay, is there the things that I've done before that really lead to today what I am, okay? And then virtue is important, okay, like any other religion. It means the right mind and the right body, and it ultimately is coming from within, from inside. So there are some important virtues like wisdom, moral concerns, and meditation. So in the old tradition, Theravada emphasized the 4 noble truths. Okay, this is relevant to suffering. Okay, so meaning that all existence is suffering. Suffering is caused by desire. Cessation of desire results in the cessation of suffering, and the eightfold path lead to liberation. This is a nirvana. Okay, so what is the eightfold path? Okay, it is under the 3 categories: wisdom, morality, and concentration. And you can see right views, right intention, speech, conduct, and totally 8 paths you should follow to reach to nirvana. And okay, very importantly, the old tradition concepts in samsara and nirvana is actually different from the larger vehicle. Okay, so but this one is more widely used. Samsara is Buddhism, is the suffering-laden cycle of life and death and rebirth without beginning or end. So it is a circle of suffering. Okay, but eventually, if you can jump out of this kind of circle, you will reach to nirvana, is the world of absolute transcendent value, the state of awakeness. So, very abstract, okay? So I come to some very concise summary, okay? The basic teaching of Buddhism. The Buddhist enlightenment is available to anyone who is willing to pursue. And all being experiences the continual cycle of the rebirth, samsara, and the suffering, dukkha, that ensues. The form of rebirth is influenced by karma, the natural consequences of their action. Okay? The state of a person's mind at the time of death and the karmic merits they have earned will determine the type of rebirth. So the last stage, the last moment, is actually quite important. So some teachers say that it's better not to be in comatose, so not to use too much sedation. Okay, remain consciousness should be very important at this final stage. So after Buddha reached the state of awakeness, nirvana, he began to share his teaching, dharma, on how to reach nirvana and attain freedom from samsara. So this is probably a very simple story of the Buddhist ideas. Okay, so what is that relevant to bioethics? I think Buddhists differ in their approach to bioethical dilemma because, okay, you have the small tradition and the big tradition, okay? And then you have this diverse indigenous cultural tradition across Asian and other world, other country in the world. And then you have diverse Buddhist practitioner and scholar and from other dimensions. And then you have this contemporary bioethical challenge. So you can see that to have a very solid or very clear-cut Buddhist interpretation will be almost impossible. And then we try to make some connection to a certain point is the modern bioethics principles, okay? So do the 4 principles apply in Buddhism? So, and in 1988, Ratnat Ku from Thailand, he turned to the Thai Theravada tradition as the source of fundamental bioethic principles. Okay, so just like what I've done before. So if we see Buddhism and in terms of bioethical deliberation, what will be the basic principles? Then he came up with 4. Okay, they are the veracity, coming from the 5 basic moral precepts, and non-injury to life. Okay, himsa, just like do no harm, and justice and compassion. Okay, karuna and compassion will be very, very relevant to beneficence. So actually, Ratnaku's Buddhist bioethics principle coincide with the 4 principles. Okay, although there are some very fundamental difference. Okay, but in moral principle, they are actually quite compatible. So now we come to the practice of bioethics in our clinical setting. How can these religious traditions be applied? So firstly, we will examine the idea of pain and suffering from Confucian and Taoist perspectives. Okay, so this is a clinical case. We did this in Singapore, so I think it is useful. So I read this case. Jennifer is 89, female, and is at the end of life, so stage 4 cancer. She receives many pain medication, as a result of which he is non-communicative. Okay, so each time he is rolled over and watched by nurse, he mourns, and it's very painful. Okay, and her daughter Laura suggests that the provider are giving her too high dose of pain medication. Okay, which prevents her from interacting with her family. Okay, so it was not especially say about if approaching end of life is that if that is a concern. So she desires that the doctor take away some pain medication so that she's more lucid. Okay, but the healthcare provider suspected that could this be a kind of elder abuse because she will be in much pain. Okay, so not enough pain control is not a good medical practice. Okay, nobody will think so. Okay, so what will this be examined by Confucianism first? Okay, so firstly, pain and suffering brings growth. Okay, so it is said that by Mencius, men who are possessed of intelligence and virtue and prudence in affairs will generally be found to have been in sickness and troubles. Okay, so this could be a good comforting word for the sick patient, but if he's too painful, it's not very good for him. Okay, and then this is a very important passage. Normally, it was used for the people who were going to a political business, okay, pursuit. So Confucius Mencius said that, thus, when heaven is about to confer a great office of any man, it first exercises his mind with suffering and his sinews and bones with toil. It exposed his body to hunger and subject him to extreme poverty. It confounded his undertakings. By all these methods, it stimulates his mind, hardens his nature, and supplies his incompetence. So this is important passage, important teaching. So we always tell our kids, okay, when they are studying not hard enough, okay, having too much fun, we say, no, you should have more pain. Then you will have a big enterprise, a big career in front of you. Okay, so does this apply to the general physical pain? We are not sure. Okay, so Confucian believe that pain is an essential element of life, a trial or a sacrifice. So people, in some times, not for particular reason. Okay, it's quite often my patient. They probably because of the doubt of the painkiller, and maybe also because that this is something I can endure. Okay, I endure more, and I will grow. Okay, my tolerance will increase. Okay, and next, the second perspective is choose to accept the legitimate destiny. Okay, so this is also my Mencius. He said that there is an appointment for everything. A man should receive submissively what may be corrected, ascribed thereto. Okay, so there's a stand in the discharge of one's duty may correctedly be ascribed to the appointment of heaven. So, okay, take the challenge and try to overcome. Okay, and perspective 3, preparing good deaths for parents is paramount. Okay, this is important. So it will come to the relationships in patient care, in health care. So when children are trying to help with their parents and in the process of dying, okay. Mencius said that the nourishment of parents when living is not sufficient to be accounted the great things. It is only in performing their obsequies when dead that we have what can be considered the great things. So filial piety is important. So at the end of life, okay, to do it properly is even more important. And next, that parents worry only their children's sickness. So, okay, so this will need some interpretation. Okay, so Mencius, he said that, okay, this is by Confucius. Okay, someone who asks why filial piety was, the master said that parents are anxious lest their children should be sick. So, meaning that you should not do bad things. So your parents worry about your immorality, okay? But sickness, we always face. So if parents worry for this sickness of the children, this is more acceptable, okay? Rather than crime or bad deeds, other things. So then, in this, okay, it's in the relationship, okay? Worry about sickness is okay. And then a proper death is even more important. Okay, so now we turn to Taoism on pain and suffering. First, accept fate and illness and live with it. Okay, and so this is by Lao Tzu. Okay, when we rest in what the time requires and manifest the submission, neither joy nor sorrow can find entrance to the mind. Okay, you will not be interfered by this. And next, by Zhuangzi on suffering and life and death, he said that someone asked him, okay, what is man? By saying that his power will complete. Okay, and Zhongni, this is Gongzi, he replied, okay, there are death and life, preservation and ruin, failure and success, all these things, okay, and it could interfere us, but they are not sufficient therefore to disturb the harmony of the nature and are not allowed to enter into the treasure of intelligence. So if you are firm and you can live with this and you accept fate and illness to live with it. Okay. And the next quote also refers to this idea. Okay. It says that they know that there is no alternative to their acting as they do and rest in it as what it appointed. And this is the highest achievement of virtue. Okay. You have great capacity and tolerance and you can live with this. And the perspective too is the key to reduce pain is harmonious balance. Harmonious balance. So this is referred to the idea of a qi. Okay, the principle of pain relief are not only to move the blockage of qi, but also to maintain harmony with the universe. So this is like the human being actually living in heaven and earth in the universe. You try to be one, try to have a harmonious relationship with the heaven and earth. Okay. And so we go back to this case. There could be some interpretation, okay, because these verses are quite abstract, quite principalistic, okay. So we need to have some, try to have some desirable interpretation. So what will be the possible Confucian interpretation? Okay. Perspective 1, reduce pain medication. That Jennifer endure pain so she can grow and fulfill her life goal and accept the fate and destiny. And second, continue the pain medication since children should not worry parents for their illness or children should help bring parents good health. So it could be two different interpretations. And what about the Taoist interpretation? Perspective 1, reduce pain medication, accept fate and adopt the change. Endure pain without being interfered. Maintain the inner harmony so one can achieve higher realm in life. Okay, we know that some religion really take this kind of hard effort and even like the body suffering as a training, as a trial. So it might be similar. Okay, but the second perspective is remove the blockage and status of qi and remain harmony with virtue. So if the medication can help with the circulating of the qi, okay, the harmonious relationships, and then it might be helpful. So this is a very important Chinese medicine theory. Okay, you try to bring back the circulation, to remove the blockage of qi, and it will help with health. Okay. Now I have some time. I will go to the next religion, the Buddhist ethics on end-of-life decisions. So for this part, I rely very much on the publication of the Buddhism scholars. Okay. So about the criteria of death, okay, in Buddhism, according to the ancient authorities, death occurs when body is bereft of three things. So it's the vitality, it's the heat, and the sentience. So probably you heard before that when the body is still warm, okay, sometimes mean the patient is not dead yet. So there's quite a common thought or practice that the Buddhist believer thinks that if people die, the body should not be touched or moved in the next 8 hours. Okay, and this will be difficult in a hospital setting. So for example, in our hospital, we have this kind of palliative medicine and try to cope with the family's kind of needs on this. So we preserve them a room for the patient to be transferred there, and the family can stay there for some time, and they can pray and they can read the scripts. Okay, so not only vitality, the heat, the sentience. So there's a story, okay, saying that the Buddha died, and he was at first mispronounced dead by his students, okay, only 25 years old. And then Ananda was then corrected by a senior monk who stated that Buddha had simply entered a profound state of yogic trance in which no vital sign can be discerned. So even though there's no vital sign, he's not dead yet. Okay. So in terms of the Buddhist philosophy and the current medical standard of brain death, so clearly if patient just brain dead, it's not, they are still alive. Okay. So the Buddhist analysis of the previous situation is that damage to a physical organ, the brain, prevents sentiency from functioning in one of its primary modes, namely the mental awareness. So for Buddhists, all people, regardless of their physical condition, are worthy of compassion. Okay, this is Professor Keong's point of view. So brain death will be insufficient criteria for death and organ donation. But you have other traditions, different interpretation. For example, the Tibetan Buddhist view. Okay, so organ donation is an extremely positive action, since it stems from genuinely compassionate wishes to benefit others. So such an action, generosity accumulates good karma. Okay, this is good, as well any suffering and pain the person may experience due to the donation. So in the process, not only this intention, but also the suffering is a good karma to benefit this life, okay, and the next life. Therefore, the wishes of the dying person expressed verbally or in writing should be confirmed. So some Buddhist religious leader in Taiwan, together with Catholics and Christians, they actually, like maybe 2 decades ago, they had a grand meeting, okay. They joined together and to interpret from their religious opinion that organ donation is actually supported by their religion. Okay, so next is the life-sustaining treatment, artificial nutrition, and mechanical ventilation. Okay, so tube feeding is difficult. Okay, but it's also important. So it supplies basic human need. Okay, is for keeping the person alive. Okay. So withdrawal of the tube feeding is an active step with intention toward ending life, and it could be an omission of care. Okay, from some point of view. So Keong said that both withdrawal and withholding tube feeding will be prohibited by the precept of against taking life, the ahimsa, okay? So not injuring, do not kill, okay? But then only other perspective, compassion, is this helping people to enter better rebirth, okay? So continue tube feeding and mechanical ventilation may have the effect of preventing the person from entering the next phase of their life. So they got stuck there, okay, by ventilation, by tube feeding. And the opportunity to experience the fruit of their karma in their next rebirth. So this could be some interference, okay, unnaturally, okay. So removing life-sustaining treatment from a person who has been sustained on them is a difficult decision, but it may have some legitimacy for Buddhists if it is done with compassion to reduce suffering. So we can see very contradictory interpretation from both fundamental doctrines, okay. And what about prolonging life? Buddhists respect the dying process and efforts to maintain life beyond what it is possible. So beyond what is possible are not encouraged. So you do not do it over. So there's a danger that life-sustaining treatment that merely prolongs the dying process may only kindle unnecessary grasping, anger, frustration in the dying person. So I think, for example, in Taiwan, our patient, our general citizen, they understand that the modern resuscitation technology actually prolong the dying process. So this is not really a benefit because it do not really enhance quality of life, and then it will be increasing this kind of suffering. Okay, so then from this point of view, okay, we can stop this unnecessary prolonging of life. Okay, and preserving life at all costs is also not supported. So what is prohibited is the deliberate attempt to destroy life. Okay, so this does not follow that there is a duty to go to extreme length to preserve life at all costs. So it is justifiable to refuse or to withdraw treatment, which is futile or burdensome. Okay, and so in this part, I think the communication strategy will be that if the Buddhist idea has been brought into this end-of-life conversation, so maybe not really go to the big tradition or the small tradition, but we focus on what is the meaningful peaceful death, and what is the patient's belief in karma, and their views on preparation of rebirth, and then what is the role of compassion play in this kind of care. So this will be a useful key concepts. Okay, and then about death and dying. Okay, so if someone in the terminal condition is accepting of their death as inevitable, refusing to eat may be accepted. Okay, and this is in the old text. Okay, so someone when already the body being nursed does not endure, and the monks are wearied and stop eating, does not take medicine, is acceptable. So we know that many senior monk at the end of their life, they stop eating and medicine and not drinking water and to embrace death. Okay, so such an exercise of will could help promote a peaceful end of life and demonstrate that mindfulness in approaching death is valued among Buddhists. So terminating life, okay, and this is prohibited by the scripts, okay. So suicide, assisted dying, and encouraged to die is not okay. So we see that for active euthanasia, it is against the precept of against killing, but passive euthanasia, refusing food and withdrawing food could be tolerated, okay. And of course, motivation is very important. So the motivation, intention, if it is for compassion, okay, and the skillful means were used, and suicide assisted a person in dying could be accepted. This is by some, okay. And then there are some examples. I will not go into details. We will need to come to some conclusions soon. So for futile treatment, it is certainly unnatural, okay, and it should not, do not need to be adopted. And to die mindfully with full awareness of the process of death is a powerful spiritual practice. So this is also much emphasized by some professor who is a major in Buddhism and a practitioner. So he thinks at the end of life, okay, this kind of mindful practice and awareness is very important. So, and for palliative hospice care, compassion is certainly very important. It's run through the entire Buddhist religion, and certainly is the base of good palliative hospice cares. So in Thailand, they have some Buddhist palliative healthcare practice. So the scholar say that it actually has two meanings. Okay, for the patient who faces reality, which leads to understanding the nature of existence, and for the healthcare provider, including the Buddhist practice and the thoughts, so will encounter suffering as an opportunity to acquire wisdom. So finally, I have a very brief summary from Buddhist perspective on end of life. So not all Buddhists accept the definition of brain death. Organ donation, though some has doubts, could be acceptable based on compassion. Food, hydration, and life support should be given to PVS patient, but not mandatory while secondary complication occurred. And then Buddhism explicitly refused suicide. So assisted suicide and active euthanasia are not acceptable. Yet some argued based on compassion and skillful means may be acceptable. Withdrawal of medical intervention may be acceptable because there is no obligation to preserve life at all costs. So with this, it is quite challenging to include three major religious traditions. I hope I'm not doing too bad a job. So this is my hospital and my College of Medicine. I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Tsai. We now have a few minutes for some questions and answers from the audience. Sir.
Thank you for an excellent talk. Thank you for coming to the U.S. To give it. I'm just wondering, in terms of the medical themes that address suffering and death in your hospital and clinic, who's on the team and what are their roles, especially clinicians, physicians?
Okay. Thank you. That's a very important question. Taiwan has a movement of hospice and palliative care, starting from maybe 20 or 30 years ago. And there are a few society, okay? One is from the doctors, and one is from the nurses, and then the other is from the general public, okay? So the three society work together. And there's also from many religious groups, okay? From Catholics, from Christian, and from Buddhists. So just like in USA, we have a Christian hospital. In Taiwan, we have Buddhist hospital. And they also join together, okay, in terms of preparing, developing a good palliative care. And then some hospital have the minister joining the team. And for example, in my hospital, because there's a strong Buddhist tradition, so they are volunteers, okay, but they are allowed, they are actually welcome to work together with the hospital, the healthcare provider, doctor, nurses, and social workers. So I can see that they even developed something like the Clinical Buddhist Society. So Clinical Buddhism, meaning that, okay, they know they want to join the healthcare, especially the end-of-life care from a religious tradition. So I think such the multidisciplinary approach should be complementary, okay, and at least very important. Quite often, modern biomedicine focus more on the biomedical level, okay, and the psychosocial, even the spiritual level, at the end of life is probably much more important. So I think the multidisciplinary team approach will be is important.
We have microphones.
I was curious, I was struck with, when you were presenting on Confucianism, about the idea of it's important for children for their parents to have a good death, but was also struck by the fact that a good death may be without sedation and suffering. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that dynamic. What is a good death? How would that be?
Thank you. That's a very important question and very interesting. Many of my colleagues, okay, they are the biomedical people, but they are devoted to end-of-life care. So they actually need to get promoted by good publications. So you can find there's lots of research regarding defining what is a good death, okay, in terms of different either culture or different country perspectives. So you can examine the issues from different ideas, from empirical research, from psychology, okay, what does it mean to be the good death? But for Confucianism, a very important virtue should be the filial piety. Okay, filial piety meaning that you respect your parents. It's not only respect; it's more than that. Okay, so there's a strong virtue in the Chinese society. Okay, very fundamental. Although this is clearly fading as it's turned into the 21st centuries. So lots of definition regarding what means filial piety. Okay, and then of course helping parents to have good deaths is a very important filial piety practice. And then to answer this question from Confucianism, maybe you will need some more comprehensive approach. Okay, what do you mean a good death? Okay, and then you need to answer what do you mean living a good life? Okay, if you have live a good life, you achieve your role in the 5 basic human relationships, and you become a virtuous person. You have not only yourself but also the society. You bring peace and security to the kingdom. So then you probably will be honored regarding having a good life and a good death. Okay, and good death, I don't think the passage refer to you should endure the suffering. Okay, because if it is uneasy, it will be a very painful death. Okay, it could not be a good death. So even by my colleague, their research, okay, pain relief, and you can have your final wishes accomplished. Okay, you talk to the people you love. Okay, and you say apology. Okay, what you was meant to say, and you say good welfare. So I think eventually I'm not sure if that is said in the United States. We have like the four key concepts, four key words. Okay, so in Mandarin is 道爱、道谢、道歉、道别, meaning to say love, to say sorry, to say thanks, and to say goodbye. So that provide a basic practice that now we think that we can assist our patient to have good death, okay, at the end of life.
Been a provider, I'm now retired, but having, gone through a lot of bedside observance of people passing over, it's not always a smooth transition. And when you bring up the issue of a good death, many patients, when they're passing over, may go into Chine-Stokes breathing or guttural breathing. They may have a seizure. They may have other strange things that are very distressing to a family. As a provider, what kind of guidance can you give us in context of these religious concepts? I mean, do we give them Valium to prevent the seizure? Do we, give them pain medicine to stop the agonal breathing patterns? How would you advise us?
Thank you. It's a good question and also challenging. Okay, but I think in general, I'm trained as a family physician. Okay, I work in the palliative care world before, even though shortly, and I participate a lot of case discussion in end of life. So I'm fully support with the hospice and palliative care. So we should try to help with the symptom control and pain relief and everything. But one point I think was mentioned is the mindfulness. Okay, I think it was emphasized by the professor who I refer to a lot, and he think at the end stage of this life, okay, if according to Buddhism, okay, this kind of transformation, the mindfulness practice and remain conscious and even vigilance is important. And quite often it is not attainable, okay, because we know that in end of life, the consciousness, everything will be gone. So if we are facing this kind of patient, if he or she really have such a wish or a request, maybe that will be challenging, okay. We will try to reduce pain, but try not to increase the loss of consciousness. So I will leave this to the experts' challenge to how to deal with this. But I think it was quite an important point when I attended his class, when I invited him to give a lecture to our students. So he also helped with the end-of-life care visiting. He says a monk. So he always teach his patient how to prepare, okay? You need to be careful about the water, diet, and everything. And then your body gradually turn into the switch off mode. And then your body could adjust. So I guess for some expert in that field, they will know how to do that. So on the one hand, try to have good symptom can control. On the other hand, try to provide patient with this capacity of mindfulness practice. So I think this is a kind of a dual goal and challenge, and well, probably later we can have some practice guidelines how to develop this for our clinicians.
I think we have time for one more question before our grand rounds officially ends, but again, we'll continue after a brief pause with Q&A. So.
Hi. So you mentioned at the beginning of your talk in Chinese culture, which I have also experienced here with my Chinese families, is and as many different cultures, is a reluctance of family members to want to impart, especially what's considered bad news, to the patient. And I mean, I think in a well-intentioned effort to protect the patient. And yet, according to Beecham's text, as well as my own experience, the overwhelming majority of patients, when they're actually asked, would you like to receive your medical information, including bad news, and be a part of that discussion, or would you like to relinquish that for your family to take care of? They say, I want to be part of this discussion. And I'm wondering, from your perspective, do you have any suggestions for when we're talking with families that come up with this concern? What would be a culturally, a way to address this to their family that would resonate for families with these backgrounds?
Thank you. That's a very interesting, but also practical question. So this is actually the story we have been dealing with in the past maybe 20, 30 years in Taiwan. I believe also in some Chinese or Eastern cultural society. So death could be some taboo to talk about this. I know that even in some Indian tribe, okay, they have some belief. If you say it, it will happen, okay? If you don't say it, it will probably just disappear. So if you have this kind of myth or afraid of that, it will be difficult to discuss, okay? But anyway, we are scientists. We know that things don't just happen because you said it or you don't say it, okay? So let's face the reality. So let me give you what we have been dealing with in the past 30 years in the Chinese society, in the Taiwanese society. Oh, of course, Taiwan is the part of China, okay? Everybody knows that, yeah. So when I was a medical student, okay, when I approached a patient and he asked me, okay, doctor, do I have cancer, okay? And then I will check with my professor, okay? So the family asked me, don't tell. And the patient kept asking me, okay, should I tell him a lie? And then my teacher told me that, okay, we respect the family. Okay, this was when I was a medical student, okay? So we respect the family. So if the family acts so, they must have their good reason. So that we respect their wishes. But then this has been changing gradually, okay, over the last 3 decades. So even now in Taiwan, we have law. We have law. Okay, it is in effect this January, last January, that if patient, you need to tell the patient, okay, unless he does not want to know, and unless he agree that his family members could know. Okay, so this is a legal change, but also signify the change of the culture of the society. But quite often, people have different attitude. Okay, some are very open. We should tell mom so she can prepare, and some are quite reluctant because I remember when my grandpa had cancer. My father, he tried not to tell him. So now my father had cancer, so I don't tell him. So he was doing this by imitation, not really have a good deliberation. So I was always suggest that, of course, the patient have the right to know, okay? Because he need to make difficult treatment decisions, and he need to sign a legal document of consent. So if without a knowledge of what is happening, so then all these documents are actually illegal. He don't know what he's signing up to. So then, legally speaking, yes, he need to know. Okay, some may argue even that he had a duty to know. Otherwise, he will not be able to be responsible for the next treatment decisions he is going to make. So then, the approach is that we teach our medical student how to do this kind of imparting bad news. And we understand that quite often the family will ask this, will have this kind of request, and then we have to discuss with family. We have to emphasize, okay, and we need to know that families experience this stage of grief process, okay. The family is dying, the family is bargaining, and then it's also very difficult for the family. So we treat the both party as someone need our counsel. So I think even I discuss, okay, and this from different cultural perspective, but that in my second talk, I will argue that these are the universal moral value, okay, and then we work toward this direction, and in terms of different cultural diversities.
Thank you, Dr. Tsai, and thank you all for coming and joining us. Please refrain from coming up to the podium. We will begin questions in just 2 minutes. No, grand rounds.